accounting. So like, why would you worry about that? You need your first client first, or you need more clients, right? And then you're going to worry about that. That's the next step. Well, let me tell you this, you're wrong. I am myself an employment lawyer, by the way, and freelance lawyer, and I deal with that all the time. Companies do it wrong, individuals do it wrong. It's a catastrophic mess, like nonstop. But you know, the worst thing is that everyone starts to tackle the problem when it becomes a problem. Very few are proactive, which is why you should stay here, I mean, seriously, and listen to the next speaker, Lars Siegert. A warm welcome on stage. He is going to talk about taxes accounting in the freelance business. Hello, hello.
Morning, everyone. Pleasure to see you all. Even though many people are leaving, but maybe they also have really good reasons for that. Because, of course, I say making taxes and accounting simple for freelancers. And of course, for some people, it doesn't apply. So this workshop is not for you. If you're not based in Germany and you don't need to deal with German taxes, then this workshop is not for you. Or if you are actually a big number in the trades. So if you have a trade, Gewerbe, more than 80,000 euros of annual profits or 800,000 euros of revenue, then this is not for you. For all the other freelancers, Freiberufler, this one is for you. So, my name is Lars Siegert. I'm the person behind German Business Buddy. And today I will take you to through something which feels daunting for many, and I will show you how to tackle this properly. And I have a question for the ones who are here. Like, who of you have ever put off, this is my title slide, who of you have ever put off dealing with accounting and taxes because it felt too complicated? Oh, well, so I see many hands. All right, then let's look at how we tackle this. So there's basically three big myths out there why people think I can't do this by myself. So first, they think they need a tax advisor to handle this correctly. Or some people even think it's by law, which is not true. Second myth is you need a financial or accounting background, or you do one mistake and everything falls apart. You can terminate everything. We will look or unburst these myths today. And it starts with my story. And the story of my wife. So in 2020, my wife became a freelancer. I wasn't a freelancer yet. And I have the business background in general, but I wasn't specialized in accounting or something like that. And, you know, she's a freelancer. She somehow needs to submit, her numbers to the tax office. And we started with an Excel sheet. Already back then, this was outdated. However, we didn't know better. So we started with an Excel sheet. We made mistakes along the way, right? Exchanging emails or letters with the tax office whenever we did a little mistake. And however, we could refine the system over time. We could replace the Excel sheet with something else, and we could build a reliable system, which I'm going to show you today. And also, nowadays, my wife handles her finances by herself, and I handle mine. So what you will walk away with is basically a framework for managing your finances without any prior experience. Of course, you need to learn something in general, but it always applies right to your business. And it's built for freelancers using the cash basis accounting method, the Einnahmenüberschussrechnung. Maybe you heard of that. This is also applicable for trades, as long as you don't exceed the annual limit of 80,000 euros annual profit or 800,000 euros annual revenue. So it's built on 5 building blocks. First, we need to start with the banks. Then we talk about invoicing, taxes, then the deadlines, and of course, how to set up it digitally so that you have everything in place. Because then everything becomes way easier if you have these 5 building blocks in place. Let's start with the bank accounts. My rule is, or my formula is 1 + 2. What do I mean by that? 1, you need a personal bank account. Every one of you has a personal bank account, and no doubt about this. However, you also need to have at least one separate business bank account. The reason is very simple. Don't mix personal and business finances. The tax office doesn't like it. Also, maybe you don't want to show all your numbers from your private expenses to the tax office. And also, it makes the accounting way harder than it needs to be. So you have a business bank account for the daily operations. And also, I recommend to have a second business bank account as a tax reserve, where you set aside the VAT you collected from your clients and also a proportion of your income or the revenue profit you made for the income tax reserve. So let me show you how much you keep. There's actually the wrong button. So what do you keep and what do you set aside? It's very simple. VAT, the VAT you collected, I mean, you write it on your invoice, right? How much VAT you collect, you put this into this tax reserve, no matter what. And then also set aside 30% for the income tax and 15 to 20% for the health insurance. Because, at some point there is payday. Yeah, and we need to have the money ready once it's payday. You don't want to panic in year 2, 3, whatever, when the tax letter congratulates you or like, hey, great profit, congratulations, but here's the tax bill. Now you need to pay a couple of thousands euros. And by the way, also for the current year, you need to already make some advance payments. Then you're really in big trouble if you don't have the money ready. It's a very common trap for many starters. So whatever is left, so more than 50% at least, right? This is the money you can use freely for now. And the question is, of course, how do we get actually money on this bank account, right? On the business bank account. Let's start with invoicing. Of course, I'm not going to tell you now all the details, like what needs to be an invoice. You can look it up. I have a list or actually a checklist which you can download at the end where you can read it by yourself at your own pace. What I just want to point out now are a few important aspects of a proper invoice in Germany. First, there are simplified invoices in Germany. So they're highlighted in green. This is information you need to put on a simplified invoice if this invoice amount doesn't exceed 250 euros, including tax, right? Gross amount. So then you can actually put less information on this invoice. This is very useful for especially starters. And also you don't need to ask for so many information from your client. And then also another very important thing is if you deal with businesses in the EU, you need to put your VAT ID on it and the client's VAT ID. It's crucial. If you don't do that, the invoice actually becomes non-compliant, and then you can't use it anymore for your input tax VAT deductions. So you can't reclaim the VAT. Maybe you also will face penalties. Maybe there will be late payments because your client will check and say, hey, this is not a proper invoice. I need a new one. So you have more work, and this is what you want to avoid, right? Always make sure, take the extra minute to check your invoices you send out, whether they really tick all the boxes. And of course, the other way around. If you get an invoice, check it. It takes 32 seconds to check the invoice. And then, already talked about VAT. VAT, you see, is somehow really important to the tax office. And there are some common scenarios. So if you deal with a German client, no matter whether business or private, you send a normal invoice with German VAT on it, 19-70%, or sometimes even exempted. For example, if you work for a university or something like that, you always need to look into this. However, this is a simple case, German client, simple invoice. Then if you use the small business rule, which we will cover also in a minute, then you don't charge VAT at all. You don't put VAT on it. Yeah, and very important also to clarify why you don't do this. You have to include a statement and saying, hey, according to paragraph 19 Umsatzsteuergesetz, no VAT is charged. That's simple. It gets a bit trickier if you deal with EU businesses. So outside Germany, you don't charge VAT also. You don't charge VAT. However, also add I already mentioned the VAT IDs and add the note reverse charge, right? That actually what does it mean is the client needs to take care of the VAT in their home country. You don't take care of the VAT anymore. And if you have a client, EU business client outside of the EU, then also you don't charge German VAT. It shifts to the third country, and this is a little bit more complex. You can look it up based on the country. And on purpose, I'm not covering B2C here because I think most of you want to work with B2B, with businesses. However, also B2C is a bit more complicated, so then you need to check another resources. So we already talked a lot about VAT. So okay, we know this is a tax block we need to cover. However, of course, income tax and also trade tax for all the trades out there, Gewerbe. If you're a Freiberufler, this is not for you, right? You don't deal with that. And many people confuse the small business rule, the Kleinunternehmerregelung, with a tax saving scheme. They somehow think, oh yeah, then I can save tax. No, that's not true. It's not a tax saving scheme. And also, if you think I'm small, so I should use the small business rule, also wrong. It depends on your individual case. Why? First of all, it's voluntarily, and also there are revenue limits. So if you didn't make more than 25,000 euros in the previous year and don't intend to make more than 100,000 euros this year, you can use the small business rule. The advantage is you don't charge VAT, you don't have to submit any returns. Yeah, so easy. Yeah, this is no VAT returns. Yeah, easy. However, there's a big drawback. When you buy something for your business, you can't reclaim the VAT you paid to someone. Let's imagine you buy something for 2,500 euros plus 19% VAT on top of it. You lose 475 euros. They are just gone. You don't get it back if you use the small business rule. So that's why the default scheme is usually better. However, there are cases when it makes sense to use the small business rule. It is when you deal with consumers only, because for consumers you will be 19% cheaper. If you intend to stay below 25,000 euros annual revenue permanently, and you have really low running costs and no major investment. And also, the small business rule has also a marketing effect, because the client, you have to put it on this invoice, right? Like, oh, I'm a Kleinunternehmer, I use a small business rule. Then they will see, oh, you're a small fish. Doesn't look so professional, right? Not the best thing to do. So and then, of course, income tax. We know the small business rule has nothing to do with the income tax. So let's talk about what matters. There's sometimes real confusion for people who come to Germany and they don't know that only profits are taxed, not your revenue. Your revenue is not touched. Profits are taxed. So basically, revenue minus deductible business expenses, this is your profit. And this is what being taxed. And also, the first 12,000 euros are tax-free, basically, in general, of all your income. And every euro above that is taxed differently at a different progressive rate, which means the 13,000 euros is taxed at a lower rate than the 40,000 euros, right? It's a progressive tax rate. And the tax office will let you know if they expect advance payments, because the tax office is smart. They don't want to wait until you file your tax returns, right? And then make all the payments. Now, they ask you for advance payments quarterly then, where they ask you, hey, please pay this in advance, and we will do the calculation in the end after the year, whether you're overpaid or underpaid. If you're overpaid, you get it back. If you're underpaid, you have to pay more. So we already know we need to somehow submit returns. So when do we need to do this? So the VAT returns, either, in most cases, monthly or quarterly, after on the 10th, after the period. And of course, there are annual returns. You see there's a VAT annual return you need to do on top of that, the income tax return, and of course, if you are trade, the trade tax return. However, this is one big date, right? One big deadline where you need to keep that in mind. And what's really ongoing are the VAT returns. So here you can see it on the timeline. From on January 10th, you would actually file the VAT returns for the fourth quarter of the previous year, and then it goes through the year. So this is an image for the people who have to do quarterly payments. And as you see again, the big annual deadline is July. And I tell you, better do it before, because in July, when it's hot, nice, you're on vacation, you don't want to deal with taxes. So maybe prepare it before, right? Because this refers to the previous calendar year usually. So you have enough time, more than a half year, to get this sorted. And now we know, hey, but we need to report somehow. But how do we do this? How do we get all these numbers together? What does the tax office really want from me? So first, I would suggest a simple folder structure. You don't need a specific document management software. Just use the Explorer, right? And create folders, one for your calendar year, 2026, and then you have these folders listed there. And the very important folder is the inbox folder. I will tell you in a minute why this matters. And then you have a file naming convention. Stick to it. Every file you have with your accounting, name it properly with the year, the month, the date. Right? So then also the file names already order it chronologically. So, and even if you might move the files from one computer to another and the metadata gets lost, still you can sort it all properly. And then mention the counterparty or the vendor you paid, the type, what is this, an invoice, a report, tax return, and a description. Like be descriptive, say what is this, like an invoice, internet for example. Then you know, this is my internet invoice. I don't need to open it, the file to see what's in there. And you need, of course, some tools for that. Have cloud storage. The reason is simple. You might want to have access to it at all times. And also you want to have a backup. It's crucial. You need to keep these records for most of them 10 years, for 10 years. Right? So you need to store them for a really long time. With Google Drive, OneDrive, or I use K-Drive. If you don't want to use the US tech giants, use K-Drive. It's based in Switzerland. You can then just save your folders as files. Of course, on the go, you sometimes get an invoice. Or anyway, if you don't have a scanner at home, use SwiftScan. There are also, of course, alternatives. I use SwiftScan. I can just digitize my receipt, and then they will be uploaded to my inbox folder. And use an accounting software. And I strongly recommend Accountable. The reason is very simple. I know down there's Safdesk, that's a competitor. However, Accountable is a bit more comprehensive. It's completely in English. It's made for freelancers, not for GmbH, UG, stuff like that. So there's less confusion. And also, you can handle all your returns with Accountable. Right, you can submit all these tax returns, and also you can submit the summary report. I didn't mention it today, but if you sell something to EU businesses, you also need to submit a summary report. Accountable can do that. So it's very comprehensive and made for freelancers. If you go to my website at --accountable, you also can try it for 2 months for free. And so this is how my routine looks like. So I already mentioned it. I scan an invoice or receipt and I put it into the inbox folder. And I do the same with every invoice I get via email or every invoice I send. I put it into this inbox folder. I just dump it in there. Right? Just dump it so that you have everything in one place and you don't need to look for those invoices later. Right? So this is what I do on an ongoing basis. And then after the months, I have a set date where I do my accounting. I recommend also to set a date. Download your bank statement because this is the basis for your accounting. And then look for every transaction, look for a document. because there's a golden rule of accounting, right? No booking without records. Like, if you don't have records, you can't, then the tax office will not accept it. You need to have proof of this transaction, and the bank statement is not sufficient usually. So you look for the files, and then you rename each file as you saw before, right? And the date should be the bank payment date or the transaction date, because then you have the link between the bank account statement and these documents. And if you don't find any documents, track it down, find it. You need to really find it. Otherwise, it wouldn't deduct it as a business expense, for example. And then book everything in accountable. I can't show it to you today. That would be it would take too long. However, accountable is really simple and easy to use. So, yeah, very user friendly. And once you have done it, every process file of the last month, you move it into the corresponding folder. So the invoices you've sent, you put it into the revenue folder. The invoices you receive, you put it into the expense folder. Right? The inbox ideally should be empty, right? So this is an ideal case, except you already have new invoices from the current months now. Then there will be something. And of course, don't forget to submit your returns if they are due. So, and of course, sometimes, with this setup, actually, you're fine. You don't need a tax advisor if your case is quite simple. You have standard freelance income, you have a clean setup, you know what you're doing, right? Then you don't usually need a tax advisor. However, of course, there are cases where a tax advisor really makes a lot of sense. You have multiple income streams, you have international clients or private clients, complex situations, or you do e-commerce, for example, then also don't do it by yourself. Get a specialized tax advisor who specializes in e-commerce. Right? Or you have major life and business changes, then of course the tax advisor is the right person to talk to. And I know it's really hard to get a tax advisor, and that's why I'm showing you how to do it by yourself, because I know that many international professionals, they don't get a good tax advisor for their business. And usually they do offer a free consultation just to get to know each other. So you remember those 3 myths, right? Now you have the framework, right, which even professionals use to explain it to beginners. You know that you don't need a finance and accounting background, and also, as I shared in my story, mistakes are fixable. The worst case is what happened so far was that we had maybe a late payment fee, or one year we did the timing of the VAT wrong, and it was okay for the tax office. As long as you comply with them, you're in communication with them, they are pretty understanding for solopreneurs. So, and how to take it from here? If you want this invoice checklist, then feel free to scan this QR code and also to subscribe to my Professional Freedom newsletter. There I explain everything for solopreneurs, freelancers in plain English, about bureaucracy and, of course, the business side, how to set up your business strategy, product development, and, of course, a marketing strategy, how to get clients in Germany. So, because it's about your skills, your business, and, of course, your freedom in Germany. And if you have any question, if any question came up, then feel free to ask me here on stage maybe, or just out there. I will be around today and tomorrow. And yeah, thank you for your time and attention, and good luck with your taxes and accounting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of these insights. As much as I see that there are no public questions, I can absolutely understand it, because who would like to share such business details, right? So feel free to approach him directly.